And we're going to start in the usual way. We're going to start by standing in Wu Ji. So what that means is we've got to stand with our feet parallel, about shoulder width apart, and the toes pointing forwards. Yeah. And I want you to bring the weight forwards into the balls of the feet. So you're going to use the balls of the feet as anchor points so that you can lift the toes up. I'm going to demonstrate my fingers. You lift the toes up a little bit off the floor and then stretch them forwards a little bit. Only a little bit, so you don't want to be really vigorously stretching, just trying to make them longer a little bit, which is kind of a weird thought, I suppose, having longer toes. But actually it's quite a nice thing, it's quite a good thing. So once you've elongated them, then we're going to start placing them back down on the floor, 2 by 2. So starting with the big toes, trying to do them individually, yeah? So separating out your toes, and then the next pair of toes, and the next ones, until you get to the little toes. And then we're going to kind of follow that movement round the outside edge of the feet to try to get a secure connection in the outside edges of the feet with the floor, and then right the way around into the heels. So all we're doing is just trying to get grounded, I suppose, as they would say, which means different things to different people. But in this case, it means actually connecting with the ground physically. And making sure that we've got a secure connection, but not really tense. We're not clawing the floor or anything like that. We just have a secure connection with the floor. So once you have that, that's your cue then to soften the ankles, soften the knees, and soften the hips. So we're trying to create yin, trying to create softness in the legs, taking some of the strain out of the muscles, out of the big muscles. And then, because we've got yin in the legs, we're going to try and create yang in the upper part of the body. So we're just going to try and stretch the spine. So to begin with, as soon as I stretch the spine, you'll probably be doing something that you think is stretching the spine, and probably it is. But a really useful approach is to not think about stretching the spine and instead think about doing something that causes the spine to stretch, or you need to stretch the spine to do. And for me, what works really well is trying to make the top of the head touch the ceiling. So trying to make the top of the head touch the ceiling whilst keeping the legs soft will cause you, because there's no other way of doing it, to stretch the spine. Okay, and so we want to go into a little bit of detail on that because there's some key points really. The first key point is that actually we don't want to be completely upright in the back. We want to be leaning a little bit forwards from the hips. So to keep the weight centered on the balls of the feet, we're going to have to move the bum back, move the pelvis back a little bit. Otherwise, when we lean forwards, we're in the toes. We don't want that to happen. So just bring the bum back a little bit so that the weight's still in the balls of the feet and we're leaning a little bit forwards from the hips. The spine is still stretching. It's just that it's stretching in a little bit forwards. Yeah. So we don't want to be bending the back any more than it's already bent in its kind of nice natural S shape. But because, therefore, we're relaxing the legs and we've now brought the center of gravity into the belly rather than in the small of the back, gravity is able to pull and right the pelvis, the position of the pelvis. So this is going to open the small of the back. It's going to create some opening in the small of the back in that part of the spine, but also it's going to correct the position of your pelvis. It's worth practicing this if you get the chance to practice in front of a mirror. Or alternatively, if you've actually got your camera working, you can make use of that to give yourself some feedback. So there's no harm in sort of turning on sideways and having a look to see how you look, because you don't know otherwise. We're trying to develop our proprioception, which is our understanding of where we are in relation to other bits of ourselves in space. Okay, so we've got that forwards lean. Another piece to the puzzle is to do what we can to bring the head on top of the shoulders, to try to get rid of any forwards neck posture. So we don't want to have any kind of neck posture like that. We want to try and bring the head back. Now, the trick that I use is we're just trying to put our attention, our focus, our awareness, call it what you will, in the belly, in the front of the spine, and then it's almost like you've got a makeup brush and somehow it's magically able to get through the skin and touch the spine, and then you're going to just brush the spine with a makeup brush. Yes, you've just got this kind of feeling inside going up the front of the spine. And as it does so, you're just shifting the spine back and up. So stretching up the front of the spine until you get to the seat of the skull, all the way up. So it will bring the head back on top of the shoulders. You don't want to allow yourself to tilt the head upwards, and you don't want to be tilting it overly downwards either. Just keep it kind of natural, looking horizontal. Okay, and then the next piece of the puzzle, now that you've done that, you will probably find, like myself, that the sternum has risen upwards and outwards a little bit, or a lot, because we've got a lot of tension in the shoulder girdle and chest area. So when you move the spine back, it will bring everything back with it. But we don't want that to happen. Naturally, you've got flexibility here. It's just that over time, we just built up tension and it tends to get stiff. So we want to try and loosen that off a little bit. So we have to be patient with ourselves, yeah? So just try to move the sternum down towards the belly in whatever way works for you. You could even do what I'm doing by stroking the chest, yeah? Just let it move down as best as possible down towards the belly. Not inwards, as some Tai Chi books suggest, but downwards. A little detail with this, when you move stuff down, you want to also resist by lifting the pelvic floor up a little bit. That helps, yeah? Now, when you move that down, it will pull your head forwards again because of this stiffness. So you have to have a little bit of interplay, constant interplay going on, where you're, bringing the head back on top of the shoulders, but with a stretch. You need to have that stretch in the spine combined with bringing the head back. Otherwise, you'll be closing the back of the spine up. Yeah. But at the same time, you then want to bring the sternum back down, which will bring the head forwards again. And then you just keep doing this. And eventually you'll find that this subtle movement that you're doing between the two gets smaller and smaller and smaller as your posture corrects itself. And as the chest area becomes less tense, becomes more soft, which is what we want to aim for. Okay, so now we've got a good stretch, appropriate posture in the upper part of the body. We've got yang in the upper part of the body. You want to check in on the legs, by the way. After doing all that stretching, we tend to lift ourselves out of our legs. So if you're a bit raised up in the legs again, or tense, then just try softening off the muscles a bit further. And again, bringing that little forwards lean in the hips to just release the smaller back. The arms are like a pair of curtains, they're just hanging there. The shoulders are neutral. I think the best word is neutral. They're not raised up. They're not being pushed down. They're not forwards, they're not backwards. They're just in a natural position with no strain on them. And here we are, we're in Wu Ji. Well, at least we're in Wu Ji stance. But Wu Ji is also, it's not just a stance, it's a state and a place. There's a place that we place our mind, place our awareness, which is the center of the head, the center of the brain. In particular, you're aiming for what's known as the Brahma cavity. Or I think they call it the cave of Brahma, which is a little space in the center of your brain, close to the pituitary and pineal glands and the thalamus. But of course, you don't know where that is without actually opening up your head and looking inside. So we're going to have a guess about where that is. And of course, some people do struggle with placing their awareness or placing their focus somewhere. So that's the first thing to overcome. If you're thinking, I don't know how to do that. I don't know what it feels like or what it looks like or what it sounds like to put my awareness or focus my awareness in a particular place. What I would ask you to do or suggest is imagine what it would be like if you could. Imagine what it would feel like if you could. Because that's really what you're doing, is you're using your imagination. So just try that. And also allow the eyelids to close over the eyes. So we're not squinting, we're just gently relaxing the eyelids over the eyes. And that helps you to turn your focus inwards, inside the body. In this case, particularly inside the head. So that's the place. We have the posture, the stance, the place. And then the state. Well, whilst still standing up, you want to try and get towards sleep, should I say. So you want to try and move your state from high alertness towards sleep without falling over. Quite tricky to do. Of course, I don't want you to fall asleep completely, because you definitely will fall over then, probably. I don't want to say that, because if I say definitely will fall over, then somebody's going to prove me wrong. Now, if we were doing a meditation class, then for me, if I was teaching a meditation class, I'd be saying, if you fall asleep, that's okay. Your body has fallen asleep because it needs sleep. And that's fine. It's absolutely okay. But because we're standing up, I don't want anyone to have any accidents. So just take yourself lower, a little bit lower, if you like, a deeper towards sleep. With the awareness held wherever you think the center of the head is, just sort of get an approximate placement. And in this stance. And we can just stay here for a few moments to collect our thoughts, calm our mind, experience getting closer to emptiness. So Wuji means nothingness or emptiness. It also means beginning, as in the beginning of Tai Chi, the first thing that we do. But emptiness is a tricky one. But what you can do to get towards emptiness is to try to reduce the number of thoughts or the speed of thoughts that are cropping up. And we find that by doing all of these things, standing in this way, holding your awareness in the center of the head and shifting your state towards sleep, that all of that stuff diminishes somewhat. And when you've had enough of that, if anybody ever does have enough of that, you can just let the eyelids open, and then we can start adding more to this physically. And the next thing to do is to try to warm up the hips, open the hips. So we're going to start opening and closing alternate hips by pivoting or rotating the pelvis. Obviously it can't rotate right the way around, just rotates as far as it can go. Keeping the knees pointing forwards. So the knees should be pointing forwards, the toes should be pointing forwards, and you've got to try to keep the knees in that position. As you turn the pelvis, there'll be a tendency for it to pull the knee in. So you want to actually physically use the hip, physically open the hip from the hip joint to keep the knee where it is. So we've got a bunch of things going on here. The first thing is we're preventing ourselves from injuring our knees by not putting any sideways force on them. But by virtue of doing that, we're also helping this process of opening the hip. And what I mean by opening the hip is creating space, creating emptiness in the hip joint. When a hip opens, when we're doing this, the other hip closes. We kind of get this folding effect. Indeed, some people call this part of the body the inguinal fold. So we're kind of really folding it. The arms, because they're like a pair of curtains, just going to do their own thing. Just let them do what they do. They're just kind of hanging around, blowing about in the wind. That's okay. Shoulders remain neutral. Trying to keep yourself leaning forwards at the pelvis. So that just doesn't mean going around like that. Apparently my internet connection is unstable. So if I've stopped or you heard me talking and then it went all funny, I apologise.
Yes, you did stop. I was about to tell you, then you came back on again.
But I came back, thank you. So I'm not sure what you heard and what you didn't hear. Perhaps it's best if I repeat myself rather than you miss something out. But actually I can't remember what I said now. I think I was saying that the arms are just relaxed and hanging there and just doing their own thing as you're turning. There we are. For me personally, I just love doing this. I could do it all day long, but we probably ought to get on and do something else. However, if you feel the same way, then there's nothing stopping you from doing that in your own time. Yeah. So let's just pause again and bring ourselves back into just a standing position, this Wuji stance. And then we're going to round the shoulders forwards so that the arms cross front of the midline of the body. We're going to shake the hands out. Use the shoulders, yeah? So try and keep the arms soft and the fingers soft. And we're just sending pulses of force or energy, call it what you will, down the arms. Physical, I mean, So it's coming right the way out the tips of the fingers, and it's a very kind of gentle sort of whip action, really, but we don't want to be giving our elbows whiplash, so it's just a gentle thing. And then we need to shake out the feet. So find a secure object that you can use as a security thing. Don't lean on it, stand on your 2 feet, but just have it there in case you go a bit unstable. And then lift one of the feet off the floor and move the foot forwards a foot length in front of you. Then tilt it at the heel. Tilt the heel so that the toes are trying to point directly upwards towards the ceiling. And then try and stretch the toes as well to give that extra stretch in the foot. And then stretch down the back of the leg. So from the bum, down the back of the leg, through the back of the knee, through to the heel. It's almost like you're pushing something into the floor, but try and keep the heel off the floor. So you need to move the leg a little bit forward if it's touching the floor. And then give it a jiggle if you can. Shake it up and down out of the hip joint. We could call this agitating or vibrating. Vibrating works quite nicely because if you can get this to work, then you'll start to get some vibrations in the pelvic cavity as well from it, because it's actually the pelvis that's doing the work. Yeah. If you can't vibrate it, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like the icing on the cake, really. And then for the cherry on the cake, try rotating the femur in the hip joint so that the toes turn inwards and the toes turn outwards. And then just go back to the normal position. Then swap sides. So bring that foot back alongside the other one, lift the other one off the floor about 1/4 inch, yeah? And then move it forwards a foot length, tilt at the heel, and then, oh, I don't know about you, but I can really feel that today. I can feel like a really nice stretching sensation in my foot. And then, so if you're feeling that, just make that go through the toes as well. Try and elongate the toes. Try to make them reach up to the ceiling. And then try and make the heel reach down to the floor by stretching out of the hip joint, down the back of the leg, through the back of the knee, through the heel. As soon as you've got that full stretch, that's your cue to start trying to give it a jiggle, and hopefully succeeding as well. So giving that a shake, that's your icing on the cake, the shaking, and then the cherry on the cake is rotating. So rotating outwards, rotating inwards. So it's the whole leg you're rotating, not the ankle. And then back to normal. And then bring the foot back together again. And then we're going to have a sip of drink. If you've got a drink there, if you haven't, I recommend you go and grab one. So we're probably not getting huffy and puffy like we might do in some of the more vigorous exercises, but we're still working, and so we still need to drink regularly. Good. Okay. We next want to work on the shoulders, yeah? Normally I'd have us go through the shoulders as well before we shake out, but we've been working on that for quite a while actually, so I thought best that we have a shake out first. So we're just going to bring ourselves back into Wuji. I'll give you a couple of reminders, but I won't talk through in detail. So remember the structure in your feet, yeah? Remember how you get that. So make sure you've got a good connection with the floor. Once you have that, use that as your cue to soften the legs. So just trying to take some of the weight out of the big muscles in your legs, particularly the thighs, calves. What will happen is the strain gets taken by other muscles in the legs. So ultimately, the strain is more evenly distributed, shall we say. but this will cause you to sink. We call this sinking, where the legs start to bend as a result of that. And then that is a cue for you to stretch the back, stretch the spine, shall I say. So just lift the spine, lift the head up with the spine. And for me, it always makes me smile a bit more. Not a lot more, but a bit. Shoulders are neutral, arms are soft, but then why not try this? Elongate the arms. So just gently elongate the arms from the shoulders through to the tips of the fingers, then rotate so the palms are facing forwards, and then with an in-breath, bring the arms up by rotating in the shoulder joints. Now, if you've got any problems in the shoulders, perhaps, well, I'm hoping you haven't, but if you are one of the people that does have problems in the shoulders, perhaps with rotator cuffs or something like that, then just go with what your body's saying to you. Don't push it anywhere where it shouldn't go or it doesn't want to go. Okay, now the arms have got a bit of a stretch in them. You're trying to elongate, you're trying to touch the ceiling, and some of you may succeed, I don't know, depending on the height of your ceiling and how tall you are. If you are succeeding in touching the ceiling, which I can do, just sink a bit deeper in the legs. You'll feel the lower back start to open up a little bit more when you do that. Okay, that's the core of this exercise, but we're going to bring in some rotations in the shoulders. So we're going to do this thing with the hips again that we were doing before, and we're going to rotate the shoulder joints in opposite directions so that when we're fully facing the left, then the arms are horizontal, outstretched in opposite directions. When we're fully facing forwards, the arms are vertical, either pointing down or up. And then when we're fully facing right, the arms are horizontal again. And you want to keep this elongation, this gentle stretch through the arms, at the same time as trying to keep the shoulders neutral. So we don't want to tense up the shoulders any. So the key points for this exercise are rotating the shoulder joints, gentle elongation of the arms, and of course the same thing as we were doing before with the hips. Getting it all coordinated in this way is extra. It doesn't matter if you can't get this, because it is a little bit like patting the tummy and stroking the head, or is it stroking the tummy and patting the head? I can never remember. So it doesn't really matter if you're not quite getting everything synchronized right, provided you've got the gentle stretches, the hips opening and closing, and this rotation in the shoulder joints. So the next time you get to a point where the arms are vertical, with the fingertips pointing towards the floor, we're just going to pause for a moment and check your posture and stance. So are your feet still parallel? Are the legs still soft? Is the spine still stretched? Are the shoulders still neutral? Are you still leaning forwards from the hips? Is the weight still centered on the balls of the feet? There's a long list. Just checking in, and also checking in on any twinges or sensations or anything, because usually that's an indicator of tension or perhaps a slight misplacement in your posture. So if you do feel those, see if you can correct it, see if you can just move around a bit and change so that goes away. And then we're going to change direction. So we're going to do the same thing as before, but we're just going to change direction. If you can't remember what direction you were going in, which is perfectly normal, doesn't matter, just go in a direction that your body likes. See if you can let your body decide which way it's going to go. And that's all that matters. So there's a lot of key ingredients to Tai Chi, and one of them is relaxing, yeah. But another one is stretching. So we have to do this double act, if you like, of relaxing and stretching through that relaxation. because we're trying to elongate everything, trying to open up the joints, trying to make them bigger. So that requires muscles that normally work in antagonism to one another are actually working together in the same direction. And to let that happen, to make that happen, we find the best approach is to relax first and then stretch through it. So Tai Chi isn't just about relaxing and floating around a room. There is also the stretch. But in order to get that relaxed, let's pause in the middle, yeah? And again, we're going to round the shoulders forwards so the arms cross in front of the middle of the body and shake the hands out. In order to get that relaxation in the body, you've got to give it permission to make mistakes. You've got to let it do what it's going to do to a certain extent. You've got to try to convince it to do what you'd like it to do, but forgive it when it doesn't. Otherwise, you get all het up and it doesn't work. It works even less, you know. So I kind of tend to think of this as like falling into your body. You know, you're sort of letting go of trying to be completely in control with your cognitive processing and letting the body do a lot of the work itself. Okay, and then the same again with the feet. So again, finding your secure item that's securely attached to the floor or the wall or both. And then feet together, move one of your feet 1/4 of an inch off the floor, forwards a foot length, and then tilt at the heel, elongating the foot right the way to the tips of the toes, and then elongating down the back of the leg, so stretching out of the bum through to the heel, and then shaking if you can. Up and down, so you're shaking through to the heel. And then rotating the whole leg one way and then the other, whilst shaking if you can. Bringing it back to point forwards, and then the same on the other side. So stepping alongside and swapping over, shifting the other foot forwards, tilting at the heel, stretching the foot and elongating the toes, trying to reach for the skies with your toes, and then stretching down the back of the leg, and then shaking if you can. Doesn't matter if you can't. And then rotating as well if you can, but it doesn't matter if you can't. And another sip of drink, if you will. Okay. Now it's time for cat walking. So with cat walking, there are a number of pieces to this. And the first piece is what I would call normal cat walking, if you like. From here, once we've got this one, we'll do some Tai Chi cat walking or just Tai Chi walking. But we're going to start off in Wuji. We always start off in Wuji. It means beginning. And what we're going to do is we're just going to try to make our weight move. In fact, we're going to succeed in making our weight move. Just shift your weight across into the right foot. Now, when you get to be an expert at this, you can do it without moving. Yeah, there is a way of doing that, but I'm not going to talk about that today, just mentioning it as it's popped up into my mind. So you can see me move because I'm doing it the way that I want you to do it. Just shifting your body weight across into the right foot until all of your body weight is in the right foot so that you can lift the left foot off the ground. The left foot won't come off the ground until it's empty of any weight. And then stepping it forwards. So you're just going to move the leg forwards a little bit and then let the foot rest on the floor. So we're not overreaching, we're just going as far forwards as we can and then placing it down on the floor. When we place the left foot on the floor, there's no weight in it. The only weight that's existing in that foot is the weight of the foot. You can just feel it stroking the floor. But once it is on the floor, then you know that you're safe to move your weight forwards and across into it to do that. Bringing your weight right the way across into the left side so that you can lift the right foot off the ground. Gosh, I've got 2 left feet today. And move the right foot forwards no further than it will go, and then letting that place down on the floor. So just pause there like that. The reason I say you're moving the foot no further forwards than it will go is because people have a habit of doing that. We have a habit of moving the foot further forwards than it will go. And to do that, you've got to have a leap of faith. You've got to bring your weight into the foot before it's on the ground. So you're stamping on the ground. And that's the opposite of what we want to do. We just want to just gently place the foot down like a cat, stalking its prey. And then we shift our weight across into the right side and forwards, lifting the left foot off the floor, placing that forwards, and so on ad infinitum, until you reach the end of your space, either a wall or a settee or a cupboard or something is preventing you from going any further forwards. And when you do that, when you get there, you can either change direction and walk in that direction, or you can go back to the start. Which is what I'm going to do. And start again. The good thing about going back to starting again is that you get to try starting, the starting position, and moving off from the starting position is different than the rest of it. So you do need to practice that a few times, I think. So to begin with, it's worth just thinking through with your conscious mind, with your cognitive processing, each of the individual movements, which means you can be a bit robotic. But then there's this thing of falling into the body, like I said before, where you have to have a little bit of faith, I suppose, in your body, doing what it's supposed to do. It's kind of a bit like a test, really, I suppose, where you're changing from having a robotic movement to kind of smooth flowing movement. And the thing about this is, if you do that and you succeed, and inevitably you will succeed sooner or later, then it's something that you can build a habit out of. You can make this a habit so that this is your way of walking when you're going for a walk, when you're going for your daily walk out there in the fresh air. I don't know what it's like where you are at the moment, but for me, it's a lovely sunny day. And to have to spend the whole day in the house when it's like this, not good. So when you go out, it can be quite nice if you're already in the habit of walking like this, because then you're no longer putting this extra strain on the feet when you're putting weight in the feet and making them stamp. It means that your balance is a lot better. You've got better control over your balance because you know your weight is always securely on the floor or on the ground. Okay, I'm going to go the full length of my room again, one more go, and then we'll add another component to it. So I start again by shifting the weight across into the right side, stepping forwards with the left, shifting the weight across and forwards into the left, stepping forwards to the right, and so on and so forth. And if I've got the robotics of it sorted out, then it's a question of trying to move smoothly through the whole thing, rounding off the edges, we might say. Okay. The next piece to this then is, well, in Tai Chi there are a number of different steps that you can take, different types of steps. And so far I've been talking this through what's known as earthquake, the earthquake step, and I'm going to do it again today, the earthquake step. But in the fullness of time, I'll show you some other steps as well. But it's good to get the earthquake step sorted out first, because in the form that I teach, in the style that I teach, the earthquake step is the first step that you take. So it's good to know that first. So with the earthquake step, it's like what we were doing, but we also, or should I say, we also turn the pelvis like we were doing at the start. So when I shift my weight into the right foot, I also close the right hip. and open the left hip. Another way of looking at it is when I shift the weight across, I send my left hip forwards. That's great that I can do that, because that means my left foot can go further forwards because it's been moved forwards a bit. Then, when I shift my weight across into my left side and forwards into my left side, I turn the pelvis back the other way and close the left hip, so that when all my weight's on the left side, the left hip is fully closed. And then the right hip is literally pulling my leg forwards, so that I can step back a little bit further forwards than I was doing before. And then I turn the pelvis back the other way. Another way of thinking about this is where your navel's pointing. Yeah, because as you turn in the pelvis, hopefully your navel's going with it. Yeah, so your navel points towards the side, if you like, that your weight is on. As you gradually shift your weight across from one side to the other, the navel turns to point that way gradually. All of these are useful cues to double check on yourself to make sure that you're coordinated right, because it's quite easy to end up turning the pelvis in the opposite direction to which it should be going and not noticing that you're doing that. Again, when you reach the end of your space, change direction or come back to the start so that you can carry on walking. Remember, we shift the weight and close the hip on the side that we're shifting the weight to. Step forwards, shift the weight back the other way. Close that hip, step forwards, move, step forwards, move. So there's necessarily a little bit of roboticness when you're stepping, because really you want to be pausing everything else when you make the step. Because if you're not pausing everything else, then you're moving weight into a foot that's not on the floor, which is not a good result. So you wouldn't really want to be walking down the road outside like this necessarily, unless of course you've decided to practice some Tai Chi outside. So we kind of moved from the realms of normal to Tai Chi. But actually, yeah, it's all Tai Chi really. And really to get the hang of this stuff, it's really kind of like about changing habits. So as I said, there's a number of components to this. We've looked at 2 of them. There's 2 more. I might change my mind in a bit and say that there's more than 2, but at the moment what I'm thinking of is 2 more. And it's arbitrary which order you put them in. So this might be a different ordering than I've done before. It doesn't matter, it's okay. With this earthquake walking, what happens is that you step forwards with the left side, but you step alongside with the right. So we've just been stepping and stepping, but we've just been stepping forwards all the time. But with the earthquake walking, your right foot goes alongside the left foot goes forwards, and then the right foot, when you get there, steps alongside, so that you're doing the same thing that you did at the start with each time you go into the right hip. Try that. So the reason why this is called earthquake is that you are screwing into the ground and you're bringing your weight and turning into the ground and then turning back out again. Yeah. So it's almost like it feels like you're loading a spring. feels like you're loading a spring. So it's like, you know, I'm loading a spring on this side, and then I'm coming out of that to load the spring on the other side. So it's almost like there's this force coming back up, hence earthquake. Yeah, so it's the earth is quaking. Perhaps a little bit more dramatic than it feels to begin with. But when you practice this a lot, you can get quite dramatic results. Okay, so that's a small adjustment really on what we were doing before. We're just stepping alongside with the right and stepping forwards with the left. We're still turning the pelvis, we're still opening and closing alternate hips. Now the hard bit. Well, it's not hard, but it's the hardest piece, I think, to talk through and get coordinated, because we're going to bring the arms into play, the hands. So let's pause with the stepping and just stick with the pelvis turning and just bring the arms and hands into that, and then we'll bring the stepping back in. Okay, so we're going to start in Wuji, but then we're going to change, we're going to sink deeper. So you're just going to soften the legs more. And then we're going to just put a spiral stretch around the arms. There's different ways you can use to get into this, but today we're just going to go straight there with this spiral stretch. So you've got a stretch coming across the chest, shifting the shoulders out that way. And the elbows are also going out that way. And you're just trying to create this spiral stretching feeling. I mean, you know, you can't get circular with your bones unless they already are circular. They tend to be quite straight. But you get this feeling of a sort of a circular stretch going around the arms. So that, I'm going to come in close and show you. So that the hands, okay, the hands are going to be at this level, but they're off the screen. So I'm just going to bring them up so you can see what I mean. The hands, you're flexing the wrists a bit so that the hands or the fingers are pointing a little bit upwards. But also, because you're moving the elbows out sideways and moving the shoulders out sideways, it causes the fingers to turn in a bit as well. So if you were Edward Scissorhands and you have these great big long blades sticking out your fingers, then they'd be making a right angle. They'd be making a right angle, yeah, in front of you. But the plane would not be, wouldn't be in line, aligned to the floor. And it wouldn't be aligned to the walls either. It would be in the middle there somewhere. So the fingers are pointing up a bit, but they're also pointing in. There we go. Slightly awkward but detailed explanation. Okay, in fact, I might move in closer so that you can see, because it's not so, it doesn't matter so much about my feet now as the arms and the hips, yeah, and the hands. Okay, so we're sunk a bit deeper, no deeper than you can sink though, yeah? You'll get to a point, you know, you can try it if you want to, get to a point where you get so deep that your knees start shaking. If you're there, you've gone way too far, but you just need to be a little bit deeper than you would be in Wuji. Notice how you have to lean forwards a little bit more to keep the weight in the balls of the feet when you do go down. And also by virtue of doing that, you'll feel the smaller back stretch and open more, which is a really nice feeling. Or it might be a bit hurty for you, it might be a bit achy. If it's just achy, see if you can work through it. If it's a stabbing pain, stop. Yeah. But you don't generally get stabbing pains there, unless you've already got it. Okay, so I digress. What we're going to do then is we're just going to do this thing with the hips again. Yeah. But we're going to make the hips drive the corresponding hand. So when my left hip goes forwards, my left hand goes forwards, and my right hand comes backwards, and then vice versa. As the right hip goes forwards, the right hand goes forwards, and the left hand comes back. It's almost a bit like, I don't know, you ever played that bat and ball game where you've got the ball attached to the bat on an elastic band? It's kind of a bit like that, where your hand is the ball and your hip is the bat, a bit like that. But there's also, it's not just, the hands aren't just coming backwards and forwards, it's making more of an oval so that the hand, the outer edge of the hand goes outwards as the hand goes forwards. And then the inner edge of the hand comes inwards as the hand comes back again. Yeah, so that they're circling like this, but obviously in antiphase and in opposite directions to one another. So just try loosening off the hips if you can, keeping the knees pointing forwards, and just see if you can just, again, fall into the body once you've got your head round all the different pieces to this. But just see if you can fall into the body and let it do its magic. And it is magic, yeah? So it might not quite get it to begin with. It does take a bit of practice. But after a while, it's like, you know, it's like, I don't know, driving a car or something, isn't it? Or eating with a knife and fork. You know, when you first pick up a knife and fork, you probably can't remember that far back. I certainly can't. But, you know, the first time I went into a Chinese restaurant and all they had was chopsticks. When you start, you sort of have to think about what you're doing. But after a while, you don't have to think anymore. You can start talking to your pleasant company that you're with. Same here. To begin with, you've got to think about what you're doing, but after a while, you can just let it go. There's different ways that we can describe or imagine what we're doing here. And the one that I like is where you imagine you've got a pair of small round pizza tables in front of you. You've got a cloth in each hand and you're just giving them a wipe. But the movement is a Tai Chi movement. It's coming from the belly. So in Tai Chi, all the movement should originate in the belly. It should feel like it's originating there. It's governed by the belly. The belly isn't moving, if the waist isn't moving, if the hips aren't moving, then nothing else is. Nothing else should be. So you shouldn't be just rigid like this, going like that. That's not quite right, because it's just the shoulders and elbows that are working. It's all got to come from the pelvis. And whilst you're doing all that, you're still trying to hold this good posture. Yeah? You're still trying to keep a stretch in the spine, trying to keep the sternum soft, trying to keep the shoulders moving out sideways. Why? Because we want to try and create space in the chest. Emptiness comes from space. Not from outer space, but from creating space. You think about a cathedral. Ever been in a cathedral? Really big, empty space. But actually, cathedrals have got quite a lot of stuff in them. So if you kept all the stuff the same and then made the cathedral, I don't know, about 100 times smaller, it would be full of stuff. Yeah, so we can make things become more empty just by making the space bigger. Okay, excellent. Let's piece it all together, folks. So now we're going to have that movement integrated with the arms, the pelvis and the arms integrated, and we're going to step as well. See, again, you might have to think about this to begin with. You might have to engage the cognitive processing. So to begin with then, remember you shift the weight into the right side and the right hip closes. So you're bringing the right hand back, the left hip opens, so you're moving the left hand forwards. And once all your weight is in the right side, you step forwards with the left foot. And then everything works together. The pelvis turns, the weight shifts across, and the hands move accordingly. And then you step alongside with the right foot, shift the weight across into the right side, turn the pelvis, bring the right hand back, send the left hand forwards. So now all your weight's in the right side, you're ready to step with the left foot. Back the other way. So you're shifting the weight forwards, across into the left side, closing the left hip, opening the right hip, sending the right hand forwards, left hand backwards, step alongside. And so on. Take it steady, folks, because there's lots of pieces to this that are working together. And you just want to try and keep track of what's going on to begin with. course, I know people watching this are coming from all walks of life, but I'm sure there's many of you that have been on management or business or occupational training courses. And I think training courses are like, they're not training, they're briefings, aren't they? You get given a load of information. That's not training, is it? What we're doing here is training, because what we're doing is we're doing what a toddler does. We're thinking about what we're doing. You know, we're having to use the cognitive processing to think through each piece of this physical movement. And by doing that, we are forming new connections between the motor cortex and the motor units in the muscles. Once all of those connections are properly formed, then the brain is trained to operate them together in this way. And then we can fall into the body, as I call it. We call it committing it to muscle memory, don't we? And you don't think about what you're doing when you're walking. You just do it. I'm going to have to walk over there. Right, I'm going to lift my foot up and step it forwards. Shift my weight across. You don't do that, do you? You just walk. But to get to that point, you've got to do this, and this is training. So that's the difference. We're not doing a briefing. We're actually training. So you can't get me on the advertising standards on this one. This is good for the brain, isn't it? Yeah? Training like this is good for the brain. It's as good as, I don't know, those funny puzzles that you do in the newspaper. It's good for the brain, but also very good for the body. Let's have a shakeout, shall we? So back into Wuji. Just check that the small of the back is open. Yeah. That's the sort of instantaneous check on how you're doing with Wuji. Am I getting a bit of a stretch, a bit of tug in the smaller back? Then you know that everything's pretty much in place. Round the shoulders forward so the arms cross in front of the midline of the body, and then shake the hands out by sending pulses down the arms, on the shoulders. Tips, that's really good. Okay, and then the feet. So the feet together, side by side, your weight evenly distributed, but then you're going to shift the weight into one foot in the usual way, lift the other one about 1/4 inch off the ground, off the floor. Move it a foot length forwards, so it's just in front of the foot, but obviously to the side. Tilt at the heel, elongate the foot, stretch the toes, try and make them touch the ceiling, and then stretch the back of the leg from the bum down through the back of the knee. I forgot what it's called then. Through to the heel, and then once you've got that stretch, there's your cue to shake. So try and jiggle it up and down out of the hip joint. Whilst you're doing that, see if you can rotate the leg in the hip joint as well. So you turn the toes in, turn them out, but you're using the whole leg, not just the ankle. And then swap sides. Stretch. Stretch the toes, stretch the back of the leg. Shake it out. Rotate the femur in the hip joint. To turn the toes out and then turn the toes in, you may find one way harder than the other. There we go. Bring it back to the middle and then have a sip of drink. I do believe we have reached the end of our time, our allotted time for today. taken a bit more time on the Wuji stance there, and also on this stepping Tai Chi walking. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you for engaging. And I'll formally draw this session to a close. But those of you that are here live, I ask you to stick around for a moment so that we can do some feedback.